Using Africa as the backdrop for MGSV was the best way to push the anti-war message Kojima pushes throughout his games. To be more specific, we go to the Angola-Zaire border, a hotbed for war and resource exploitation. MGS has always felt somewhat real because the themes it pushes. There are other games which convey heavy topics, like in Modern Warfare 2019 with drawing the line and getting blood on your hands and how far would you go. Though that campaign was very good and the message it tried to say was conveyed well, the MGS series has always had more bite with what it tries to convey. In my opinion, it's one of the best game series which conveys heavy topics and themes to the players, like child soldiers, information control and biological warfare. Taking place in the year 1984, we as the fake Big Boss go on a journey to stop Skullface, our white whale so to speak, with the aid of Ocelot, Miller, our PMC Diamond Dogs and our chopper, codenamed Pequod. After finding and interrogating Huey, he tells us Skullface has pursued new research in Central Africa, which we later find out was the vocal cord parasite. Miller and Ocelot would brief us on the current state of the region, which interlinks with what actually happens in real life, the two sides being Uniter, backed by the West, and the MPLA, backed by the USSR and Cuba. The Diamond Dog forces were hired by the MPLA to push back at Uniter, which means in the context of the Metal Gear universe was most likely backed by Cypher, which means we use the client ship of the MPLA as a means to push back at Cypher. Later on, we'd be informed of three major PMCs in the region: the Contract Forces of Africa, or the CFA, Rogue Coyote, and Zero Risk Security. What I find fascinating about the use of Africa in Metal Gear Solid V, and during this time period in the Metal Gear universe, we can see how the Phantom Pain is essentially a catalyst for the later games in the series, like in MGS4 and the War Economy. Using Africa was such a perfect way to foreshadow Big Boss and Miller's dream of using war as a business. Though, in a way, the PFs can also represent the Patriots' ever-growing presence like a superorganism. Looking into the contextual information from the wiki, the CFA were created by the Viscount, a British citizen and ex-SAS member. The Rogue Coyote forces are also made up of Rhodesian SAS members. I say this because Major Zero, the leader of the Patriots, is also British. So by using this, we can see how other PFs are in a way under the Patriots' influence, which foreshadows MGS4 and the Patriots' control over politics and war. But going back to the context, Africa was the perfect location due to the real-life connotations of that place and era. Obviously, the Cold War spanned from the late 40s to the early 90s, and during the Cold War was a time of proxy wars and civil wars, with people either wanting to follow in the footsteps with America or the USSR. In Angola in the 70s through to the 90s, they had a civil war. As I stated earlier, the two sides were Uniter and the MPLA, but there were other conflicts. In 1964 we had the Congo Crisis, and from 1964 to 1979 we had the Rhodesian Bush War. In the Angola-Zaire region with the three PMCs, we've also got two tribal conflicts as well, that being the Mbele and the Buta. Mixing this with the PMC occupations, it creates a hotbed for civil unrest and conflict. Alongside this, we've also got a resource war, mainly with diamonds and oil. In the first mission in Africa, Pitch Dark were tasked with stopping an oil refinery which is causing contamination for the villages downstream. At the start of the mission, if you pay attention to the village, we can see the CFA train child soldiers. This leads to mission 18, Blood Runs Deep, our objective being to execute the Mbele squad and the commander. When we go to the diamond mine, it turns out that the Mbele squad are a group of child soldiers. We'd fake their execution and secretly take them back to Mother Base, even though we're considered heroes by the game, because we're stopping Skullface, and to some extent we are. But in the cutscene when the child soldiers first land on Mother Base, Venom Snake would try to sell the idea to Miller that using the kids, saying to Miller, he's tougher than he looks. Even though we've saved them from one horror, it doesn't stop Venom Snake from thinking the idea is valid. Luckily, Miller thinks otherwise and expands housing in Mother Base, teaching them how to read and write and do basic things. I like to think that the atmosphere in the Phantom Pain is one that never rests. I guess once you look into it, there aren't any good or bad sides, it's just people doing things as a means to an end. It could be being hired by the MPLA to fight back at Uniter, which in turn hurts Cypher. It could be taking child soldiers from one place to another, and then thinking it's a good idea to train them for your cause. It's an endless cycle of war, and I think that's what Africa is supposed to represent, the futility of war, in a state versus state war, or in this case something more intricate with tribes, PMCs, resource exploitation, most importantly, language, being one of the major themes in the Phantom Pain. In a video I've done about the supernatural elements of MGSV, I spoke about how language is used as a weapon. I called it a culture war because it's one language over another vying for power over the people. Culture is transmitted through the language of elders passing it down to the new generation of that culture. Skullface's vocal cord parasite represents that war. In the Devil's House, Snake finds people strapped to gurneys with earphones in their throats. Their lungs are swollen and pink with cysts. We later find out that it was a place for Skullface to harvest different strains of the parasite, each strain correlating to a different language. But the vocal cord parasite can also represent a metaphor for colonialization. With the scramble for Africa by European powers, the African cultures, big or small, were assimilated into the superorganisms that could be the French Empire, the British, the German, Italian, Portuguese, or Spanish. With the assimilation by larger powers, smaller, more indigenous cultures would die out and be replaced by the larger powers' culture. The British, being the largest empire in history, would use its language as a lingua franca, not just in Africa but in other parts it conquered, like in the Middle East and India. Skullface aims to rid the world of infestation, as he calls it, wanting to wipe the English language off the face of the earth. But it goes back to the idea of the superorganism. The Patriot superorganism is more political and military, with slowly controlling PF forces in Africa and then the world. Skullface's superorganism is more literal, as he uses a literal superorganism, the vocal cord parasites, to spread his influence, and in a way, Miller's and Big Boss's superorganism of influence, which we could say is a yin and yang with the Patriots, as Miller and Big Boss want to spread their ideology of PMCs and making a war economy, which is also the Patriots' endgame. But I think that's enough for one video. Thank you for watching.